This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. You know you're getting old when you can't make it past the first two lines of the Lollapalooza lineup without saying, "Who?" Really feeling my age today, y'all. Anyway, here's what's on tap. Tonight, America's small businesses need some help from the latest pandemic relief package, but many are discovering they've been denied, sometimes for some puzzling reasons. Plus, cryptocurrency is hitting some choppy waters. What's behind the crash, and is it just a bit of volatility or a long-term trend? But first, here's what you need to know right now. Cities and states are rolling back mask requirements ever since the Centers for Disease Control updated its guidance. Today, New York City got rid of its social distancing guidelines and mask mandates for fully vaccinated people. Emphasis on the fully vaccinated part though. The way the CDC puts it, the choice is yours. Get vaccinated or keep wearing the mask. Of course, there are some exceptions to the rule. In NYC, masks will still be required on public transit, nursing homes, homeless shelters, correctional facilities, schools, and healthcare facilities. Texas is taking a different approach. Governor Greg Abbott threatened to fine any cities and local officials who implement a mask policy, saying people can still make their own individual decisions to wear a mask. If you are vaccinated, there's another perk in the works: summer travel abroad. Today, the European Union announced plans to allow vaccinated travelers from countries with low COVID-19 infection rates. The list of approved places is expected to be released this week. The New York Attorney General announced its probe into the Trump Organization is now a criminal investigation. This week, the New York AG joined the Manhattan District Attorney, who's been investigating the company in a criminal capacity since 2018. The investigation is centered around whether the Trump Organization misled lenders and insurance companies about the values of its properties. The New York AG also plans to continue its civil investigation. That's looking into whether the Trump Organization used misleading information to get loans and tax benefits. Typically, consequences from civil cases can include fines and financial repercussions, but potential criminal wrongdoing creates a whole new set of consequences, including possible jail time. If one or both prosecutors believe there's enough evidence to charge the former president, his associates, or his company, an official complaint would likely be filed by the end of the year. Today, Texas signed one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. It bans the procedure as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy, with an exception for medical emergencies, but none for rape or incest. The bill also opens the door for almost any private citizen to sue abortion providers. Any individual can sue anyone who helps a person get an abortion, including providers. The person suing doesn't need to know a patient or even live in the state. The law is supposed to take effect in Texas this September, but abortion rights advocates are already planning to challenge it. Several other states have introduced fetal heartbeat laws, but court challenges have stopped any from going into effect. The Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling decades ago established a constitutional standard meant to stop states from banning abortion before the fetus could survive outside the womb, which generally happens around 24 weeks into a pregnancy. The signing of the new bill in Texas comes just days after the conservative-dominated Supreme Court decided to take up a case over an abortion law out of Mississippi. That law aims to ban abortions at 15 weeks. The Small Business Administration has offered relief to hundreds of thousands of people operating small businesses during a rough year, but more than half of the 1.1 million applicants have been denied funding, and some of those denials were for strange reasons. Newsy's Patrick Terpstra spoke to some of the people who were denied funding and gets to the bottom of what went wrong.
Terry Senecal co-owns the Saghetti Music Store in Maryland.
Here's a repair that we have right now.
Like so many small business owners, she has struggled to stay open through the pandemic.
It's been horrible. I don't want to close this store and put 14 people on unemployment.
In April, the U.S. Small Business Administration invited Senecal to apply for a new round of federal COVID aid, up to $10,000 she would not need to pay back. She went for it.
I was like overjoyed. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Weeks later, the SBA rejected her application with a weird explanation. The agency told her one reason she didn't qualify was she had failed to pay child support.
Is more than 60 days delinquent.
But Senecal says that's impossible, that she's never owed child support. She doesn't even have any kids.
You know, I told my mother, I was like, Mom, the SBA didn't pick me because I have a child. And she goes, a what?
She didn't know she was a grandmother.
Yeah, pretty much.
Senecal is among dozens of small business owners who contacted us to say the SBA turned them down for reasons that just aren't true.
I felt helpless.
Jamie Quinones, a hairstylist, told she didn't qualify for relief because she's not a U.S. citizen, even though she was born in California.
The people that answer the phone, the reps, they have no clue what's going on.
Others can't get funds because the government says they're not really alive. Evidently, I'm dead, tweeted an applicant with a cussing red emoji. Since February, just over 1 million small business owners have applied for what's known as Targeted Idle Advance Funds. We've learned nearly 600,000, more than half, have been declined. What's going on? We now know. You may remember last year, COVID aid got out the door so fast, crooks were able to loot the Paycheck Protection Program and other relief funds
to buy splashy luxury items for themselves.
We learned this year new anti-fraud procedures are in place, more red tape. Nick Schwellenbach is at the Project on Government Oversight, an independent watchdog.
And now the pendulum has swung in the other direction.
Applicants now have to answer pages of questions. One mistake can get them denied. The SBA tells us Quinones wrote she wasn't a U.S. citizen and that Senecal said she did owe child support. That was news to them.
I mean, I'm always careful when I fill things out.
The SBA acknowledged to us the agency is also making mistakes, relying on imperfect background check databases, spitting out inaccurate or outdated information. And the SBA says because of a technical glitch, many were denied without any explanation at all.
The system is awash in fraud, and so ramping up these anti-fraud efforts makes sense, but if they aren't well executed, you can end up excluding genuine small businesses who should have access to this money.
The agency has set up an email address for people to appeal their denials for aid. Quinones succeeded with her appeal, notified by SBA after our interview that she will receive $9,000. Senecal finally spoke to the SBA about her case. She learned she still won't qualify for aid. Even though the SBA invited her to apply for funds, her music shop wasn't technically in a low-income area. The SBA says this and businesses not losing enough money are the reasons for most denials.
The loss is great, not only financially, but emotionally.
Patrick Terpstra, Newsy, Washington.
The cross-border attacks between Israel and Gaza has entered its second week, but some of the history surrounding this conflict goes back more than a century. When you're back, we'll try to clear up some of the most frequently searched questions. The conflict across Israel and Gaza goes way back, but that doesn't mean everybody's an expert on it. So we decided to take a look at the most frequently Googled questions on Israel and Gaza to try and bring some basic facts and context to what folks might be wondering here. Let's start with clearing up something basic. So first, let's establish where everything is here. A snapshot from Google Earth shows you Israel, the city of Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. If you zoom in, you'll see the city of Gaza is in the northern part of the Strip. So where do Palestinians primarily live? Palestinians are actually scattered throughout all of these areas. And to understand why that is, we'll actually need to roll back the clock a bit and look at some older maps. Back in the day, this whole area was predominantly considered Palestine. In 1917, Britain declared its intent to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. By the end of World War II, after the Holocaust, there was more support for the creation of a Jewish state, but the territories never quite got figured out. Gaza has historically always been allocated to Palestinians, but across history, that and other territories have been disputed. As you saw on the map there, the lines drawn across the city of Jerusalem are particularly complicated. The ancient holy city has special meaning to Muslims, Christians, and Jews. According to international law, the city should actually be administered by the United Nations due to its importance to those three Abrahamic religions. Both Israelis and Palestinians have claimed part of the city as their capital. Israel has had control over the western portion of the city since 1948. In 1980, Israel claimed all of Jerusalem, including the eastern part, as their capital, but the UN General Assembly didn't recognize the move. Since then, the control over the eastern side has been a little complicated. Palestinians have claimed it as the site for their future capital. East Jerusalem recently made headlines because that's where Israeli forces cracked down on Palestinians outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque, leading to hundreds injured and kind of igniting this whole recent conflict. So that name, Hamas, is an Arabic acronym for Islamic Resistance Movement. Basically, they want to liberate Palestinians from Israel's control and take back the land for Muslims. It's worth noting, Hamas is separate from the Palestinian National Authority, which is the main governing body of Palestinians. Also worth noting, the US government considers Hamas a terrorist organization. Back in the 1990s, Hamas came to prominence after launching several suicide bombings that killed Israelis. Some folks blamed those actions for pushing Israel away from a peace process. The definition of Zionism has evolved over time, but basically, Zionists believe in the return of the Jewish people to what they see as their homeland and the existence of a Jewish state. Some people also interpret Zionism's mission to be expanding Israel's borders. The homeland has never had the boundaries quite sorted out, which has led the Jewish settlements and Israeli forces to occupy places that were at one point in time allocated to Palestinians. So even mentioning the word apartheid in this context is controversial for some folks. But hey, online searches for this, especially related to Israel and Gaza, have been spiking the last week. According to Merriam-Webster, in short, it's racial segregation. The best known example from recent history is from the Republic of South Africa, where a white minority-led government had a policy of segregation and discrimination against the non-white majority. So coming back to Israel and Gaza, Human Rights Watch does label this situation in the West Bank as apartheid. That's because Palestinians who remain in the area claimed by Israel face serious obstacles like restricted access to resources, limitations on travel, and restrictions on where they can live. Jewish Israelis in the area don't have the same challenges. So yeah, that covers 5 core questions on this super complex issue. Kind of just gliding across the surface of a deep, deep sea trench of an issue here, but sometimes you just gotta hit the basics. A lot of people probably opened up their stock trading apps or cryptocurrency exchange platforms this morning and found themselves midway through a roller coaster-like descent. Bitcoin, for example, reached a record high back in April and plummeted by 50% today. So what gives? Newsy's Tyler Adkison explains what's behind the drop.
The world's most heavily traded cryptocurrency plunged even further Wednesday, following a week-long sell-off. Bitcoin fell to $30,000, down over $13,000 in the past 24 hours. It's also less than half of its all-time high reached last month. Other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum and Dogecoin were also down Wednesday morning, ultimately paralyzing major crypto trading platforms. So why the drop? Part of it can be traced to Tesla CEO Elon Musk. After Musk tweeted that the company would no longer accept Bitcoin because of its contributions to carbon emissions, the price began to fall.
We all know Elon is a bit volatile, and quite honestly, the statements he's making now are still not making completely sense. He's now saying the stuff that we already knew 2 months ago and long time before then, but still some quirks that need to be addressed.
But the bad news for crypto doesn't end there. Regulators in China recently banned financial institutions and payment companies from providing cryptocurrency transactions. But it's not a surprise either, given China's cold stance on cryptocurrency, in part because 70% of all Bitcoin mining happens in China, and that takes up a lot of energy.
This network is definitely not green at the moment. It's running for a big chunk on Chinese coal, and that's also a security risk.
On some level, this latest turmoil shouldn't be that big a surprise for anyone who watches crypto closely. Along with its decentralized nature, one of the best-known aspects of cryptocurrencies is their volatility. Also worth noting, many cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, are still way up over the past year, meaning the big picture can give crypto investors at least a bit of comfort. Tyler Adkison, Newsy, Chicago.
Non-vaccinated and immunocompromised folks might have questions about their rights in navigating businesses, workplaces, and even recreational activities. If so, we've got answers. There's an inverse relationship right now between COVID-19 vaccinations and restrictions. The former is rising while the latter is falling. But non-vaccinated and immunocompromised folks might be wondering about their rights. Like, can a restaurant refuse them service? How can that play out in a workplace, for instance? Our series Dose of Truth helps separate fact from fiction when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. Newsy's Amber Strong spoke to experts who help us clear up the intricacies of your vaccine-related rights.
It seems the country is being divided, even if unintentionally, between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. From restaurants.
So when the guests come through the door, it's going to be the first question that we ask: are you guys vaccinated? Can you just show us a quick bit of proof?
To cruise lines like Norwegian, who are requiring all guests and crew members to be fully vaccinated.
If you haven't had a COVID-19 vaccine, you may be wondering about your rights. Experts say that depends on the situation.
Can restaurants legally turn away a customer who cannot prove that they've been vaccinated?
There's no federal law prohibiting a private business from requiring that patrons show proof of vaccination. We're all familiar with no shoes, no shirt, no service. The key is that any such requirement be applied in a non-discriminatory manner against certain groups, for example, a person with a disability.
Instead of turning away all of those who have not been vaccinated, what we might see is restaurants requiring masks and social distancing for those who are not vaccinated or who have no proof of vaccination, which would really be a type of accommodation.
Then there's work. Legal experts say jobs can require a vaccination for current or future employees with some caveats.
Employers can impose a mandatory vaccination requirement, provided that they allow for certain exceptions for disability-related reasons and religious-related reasons.
And despite legal advice trending on Twitter, the federal privacy HIPAA law is not a medical catch-all.
Generally speaking, HIPAA does not cover private businesses vis-a-vis their patrons or customers, nor does HIPAA cover employers vis-a-vis their employees.
Asking an employee whether they've been vaccinated or not has not been found to be a medical inquiry or a medical exam under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that question in and of itself of just whether an employee is vaccinated or not, that is something that's permissible.
Now, experts say as we navigate this new world of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, some long-standing federal laws are likely to see legal challenges. Amber Strong, Newsy.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. We're coming up on 1 year of ITL, so hit us up and let us know what you like, what you don't like, and maybe what you want to see in year 2. If your suggestion is get a new host, then we have to square up. Earlier in the year, the Biden administration issued an executive order pledging to tackle the climate crisis at home and abroad. There's no direct mention of animals or wildlife in the order, and some of the details have yet to be released. But wildlife conservationists say this is still a step in the right direction. National reporter Stephanie Stone has more.
Polar bears, koalas, elephants, butterflies. Scientists say all directly impacted by climate change.
We have huge drivers of rapid environmental change, like climate change, for instance. And climate change is impacting wildlife species and wild places and, the very planet we all share across the globe.
A huge problem, says Dr. Megan Owen, Senior Director of Wildlife Conservation Science at the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. But she says it's also a chance for humans to make a difference.
I can tell you that, in the most straightforward way, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. There is just no alternative. The faster we can do it, the better, but it is a commitment to being a part of a solution rather than continuing to behave as we always have.
The evidence, she says, is there. Take polar bears, for instance.
I don't think any other species illustrates as well the real tangible impacts of climate change. The polar bear's sea ice habitat is literally melting away.
Butterflies are experiencing a 2% decline in population as temperatures are warmer and warmer for longer periods of time.
People don't necessarily notice a catastrophic decline, and in the case of butterflies, for example.
And then there are koalas, who we all quite literally watch disappear as fires raged through Australia in 2019 and 2020, killing thousands of koalas. As for elephants, they are living with drought, just like people.
There are more wells dug for people because they need the water to survive as well. And the wells that get dug are sort of traps for baby elephants or for young elephants, and in no way intentional.
Okay, so all of this is happening. What are some things that we can do about it, and what is happening already to help correct some of this?
Support regulatory action that's going to support green energy policies.
We have to think about collectively as humanity, how do we best manage that balance? How do we keep wildlife in balance with our own balance and maintain that healthy ecosystem, maintain healthy wildlife, because that will have a direct result on our own health.
Paul Barabalt is president and CEO of the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, which operates the zoo, safari park, and 200 conservation scientists that support work at home and abroad. The Biden administration announced that the U.S. will target reducing emissions by half by 2030. Barabalt says making that effort is a good step for the future coexistence of both animals and people.
If we get everyone to focus on their own community and small things that they can do, such as, simple things like turning off lights, not running water as much as, while they're brushing their teeth.
Little things that turn into big things for the greater good. I'm Stephanie Stone, reporting.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more In the Loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.